I just got back from a long day at work and was far too tired to bother cooking anything. I tried my usual takeout choices, but one said that due to the late time, it was collection only, and the other one rang out. I didn't want to waste time driving across town to pick up food. I checked the drawer in the kitchen where I kept restaurant leaflets and pulled one out for a new chicken place. From the times listed on the front, it should still be open and taking orders for delivery, so I decided to give it a try. At this point, I decided if this doesn't work, I was just going to go to bed hungry. Yep, it really had just been one of those days. This woman answered my call and I asked her if they were still delivering. She said they were, so I rambled off my order and asked how long it'd be. She said about 20 minutes. I thought this would be plenty of time to grab a quick shower and change out of my sweaty work clothes. I'd been in the bathroom for 5 minutes max when I heard this frantic knocking coming from my front door. I sneaked a look through my curtains and saw someone standing there gripping what looked like a paper bag. I did think this was unusually fast, especially considering the time it took to cook the food and then drive here, but I just put it down to being late, so maybe the food had been ready to go or something. I guess I was just too tired to think it all the way through rationally. The knocking continued, so I quickly pulled on some pants and a t-shirt and rushed downstairs. I was pulling $30 out of my wallet, enough to cover the food and a tip, when I realized something. The knocking had stopped. I saw the outline of the person through the frosted glass, so I knew they could see me too. They weren't moving at all, so I shouted, "Hang on 1 minute." As soon as I spoke, the frantic knocking started up again with such ferociousness it made me jump. It was relentless. There's no way they hadn't heard me. I didn't understand why they were knocking when I just spoke to them. I opened the door slowly so they didn't fall forward. I expected them to stop knocking, only they didn't. Even when I stared at them through the gap, it was a man, probably in his mid to late 20s. He had this red and white cap on and was staring straight at me with this empty look. I apologized for taking my time, held out the money, and went to grab the bag out of his hand. That's when I saw that something was dripping from the bottom of it. At first, I guessed it was just grease, but then I looked down. By this man's feet was a watery red puddle. The man followed my gaze, stopped knocking, but kept his hand against the door, and then gave me this smirked smile. I just wanted this guy off my property, so I again tried passing him the money, but he wouldn't take it. He just kept staring. So I placed the money on the doorstep, told him to leave the bag on the step, then closed and locked the door. He immediately started again with the frantic knocking. It echoed through the entire house. I decided to call the chicken place and tell them to get their delivery man to stop thudding on my door before he broke it. The same woman answered the phone, but when I told her about the driver, she went deadly quiet. Then she told me that she'd watched the delivery driver leave about a minute ago. The man at my door wasn't the same delivery man. I ended the call, then rang the cops and told them a crazy, fake delivery man was knocking on my door. I even held the phone out so they could hear the thudding sounds. I honestly thought this man was going to get in my house and do, I don't know what. So I grabbed a baseball bat and stood in my hallway and waited. About 5 minutes later, the thudding stopped, and I could tell through the frosted glass that he'd gone. I stayed where I was, not daring to check the door. Eventually, there was another knock at the door, followed by a shout saying it was the police. I put the bat down and opened it. The man had left that paper bag partly on top of the money. One of the police officers opened it. This rancid smell came from out of it, and the cop almost dropped it. I saw what was in it. This mushed up, congealed thing. The actual delivery man appeared at that moment. He sure seemed surprised by all the commotion. I went to grab the money to pay him, but then I realized it was drenched in something wet and sticky. Blood. The cops searched the area for the fake delivery man, but they never found him. I have no idea why he chose to pick my doorstep that night. That's something I guess I'll never know. I later found out the contents of the paper bag. A pig's heart. I've never ordered takeout since, and I never will again. I'm just glad that it wasn't a human heart in that bag, and that it didn't end up being mine next. I used to work as a delivery driver for this burger restaurant. Every Tuesday night at 9:01 p.m., like clockwork, the same woman rang up and placed the same order. I didn't think anything of this, as it was normal for some customers to have their routines and stick to them religiously. Hey, whatever worked for them. I wasn't there to judge. This woman always ordered a double cheeseburger, fries, and a chocolate shake. She answered the door pretty quickly and seemed a bit jittery, but she was friendly enough and always tipped well. My Tuesday night shift started like any other. It was generally quiet, but I'd made a few deliveries, mostly to students, and now I was hanging out with my colleague Andre and sneaking fries when he wasn't looking. Then, no surprises. At 9:01 p.m., the woman placed her usual order. I drove the short drive to the woman's house and hummed to myself as I walked to the door and rang the bell. Like I said, she usually answered promptly, but this time she seemed slow. I rang the bell again and listened to the tune ring outside the house. I rang the bell again and listened to the tune ring out inside the house. I heard footsteps within, so I readied the food bag and made sure I was smiling as I expected the door to open. More footsteps sounded, but the door didn't open. At this point, I felt annoyed. I had better places to be than standing on this doorstep. This time, I tried knocking on the door and shouted that I had her delivery. More footsteps. They sounded like someone was scurrying up and down the entrance hall, so I shouted, "Hello, I have your food. Is anyone there?" The scurrying footsteps continued, but no one answered. I was done with this, so in an irked voice, I shouted, "Okay, I'm just going to go now." This was so annoying. I couldn't stand time wasters. I was cursing to myself as I turned around when I heard the woman say, "I can't open the door right now, just leave it on the doorstep." I told her that I couldn't do that as it was company policy that we had to take the cash first. She didn't reply after that. Then the scurrying sound started up again, followed by clattering and a single high-pitched scream. I shouted, "Miss, is everything okay in there?" Again, no reply. I stayed there as still as I could. I had a really bad feeling about this. Then the door jerked open, and I immediately jumped back off the step. Standing there was a boy, no older than 10, dressed in a red t-shirt and wearing black sunglasses. He didn't say anything to me, he just stood there. I asked him if everything was okay, but he didn't say anything. He started moving his lips as if he was saying something, but no words came out. He kept doing that. I tried peering back at him, and that's when I saw something on the floor further behind him, something covered with a blanket. "Hey kid, where's your mom?" I asked him, but again he moved his lips but didn't say a word. I told him I had the food order and really needed to talk to an adult. He sniffed the air, then reached out and snatched the bag out of my hand, then raced back into the house. By this point, I was a little freaked out, but more than anything, I was mad. A 10-year-old knew better than to just take food without paying. The door was still wide open, so I took a step inside. "Hello, lady. I really need the money for the food." I took another step in and noticed that there was a broken vase and things on the floor, close to the blanketed thing. I stared down at it, not knowing what it was covering. Then suddenly, I saw the entire bundle twitch, and something lurched out from beneath it. I swore loudly and jerked back. Then I saw what it was. It was a shoeless, tight-covered foot. I took a deep breath, then pulled back the blanket. There, curled up in a bloodied, battered ball, was that woman. She seemed in a bad way, but she was still breathing, so I pulled my cell out of my pocket and called for help. I wasn't sure if the woman could hear me or not, but I told her help was coming and that she'd be okay. Then suddenly, I heard those scurrying sounds and saw that kid flit out of one room and into another. I shouted that his grandma would be okay and that help was coming. I thought he was just scared or something, so I slowly creaked open the door so I could reassure him. Then he was in the corner of the living room, shoveling the contents of the food bag into his mouth. When he realized I was watching him, he stopped, slowly turned his head to look at me. Then, with this unnerving grin on his face, he removed his glasses, revealing those vivid red eyes, as red as his t-shirt. I hurried out of there and went and sat by the woman. For the entire time, I stared at the room the kid was in and hoped more than anything that he wouldn't leave it. The woman started to come around and managed to sit up. I just didn't understand what had happened to her, when as far as I could tell, it was just her and the kid in the house. She couldn't even stand up and seemed disoriented. That was until I told her I'd call for help. Then she lost it. She crawled over to me, grabbed my ankle, and mouthed the words, "Get out, you traitor. Go and never come back." I didn't need telling twice. I ran to my car and sat and waited until the ambulance and some cops arrived. I watched as the paramedics wheeled the woman into the ambulance. I expected to see the cops come out with the kid, but when they didn't, I went and asked one where the kid was. He gave me this confused look and told me there was no kid. The woman had been alone in the house, and she said she fell over. I felt a chill run through my body. I hadn't imagined the kid. He'd definitely been there. I'd been watching the door the whole time, and he hadn't left, so where did he go? None of this made any sense. I tried my best to put the ordeal behind me and continue with my job. I was constantly on edge making deliveries and talking to customers, but I managed to get by. But then on the following Tuesday, exactly at 9:01, the same woman rang up and placed her usual order. No way I was going back there again, so I quit then and there and left. I've never delivered food since, nor have I been anywhere near that house. I used to work weekends as a delivery driver for this pizza place in town. As a high school student at the time, I was glad for the extra money, and the free pizza at the end of my shift was a bonus. I started like any normal Saturday night shift. The orders came in thick and fast, and I drove around nonstop. I just returned to the store to pick up my next delivery. Normally, my boss stayed out of the way, but on this occasion, he came out with the pizza box, passed it to me, and with a smirk said, "Let's see what you're made of. This is going to 4 Blakemere Street." I found this kind of odd, but figured it was just my boss messing with me. So I thought no more of it and drove out to the given address. I parked up in what seemed like a regular, quiet neighborhood. Number 4 didn't have a mailbox, just a bumpy patch of dirt in the front yard where it looked like it had been ripped up. As I walked up the path, no lights came on or anything. The whole place was basked in darkness. There was this rusty old pickup truck in the driveway, so I had to use the flashlight on my phone to help me navigate past it. I stepped out onto the porch and went to knock on the door. It was already slightly open, so I balanced the pizza on my arm and shoulder so I could bang on the door without it swinging open. I waited for the sound of footsteps, but none came. So I peered through the gap in the door and shouted, "Hello, pizza delivery." It was pitch black in that house, and I was beginning to think that whoever was in there had fallen asleep or something. This was frustrating, as no answer deliveries meant wasted time and loss of tips. I just didn't know why anyone bothered ordering food just to be no-shows. I tried shouting into the house one last time. Then as I turned to leave, I muttered under my breath, "Thanks a lot, jerk." I was walking down the porch steps when the front door slammed shut. It was a still night, so it couldn't have been the wind. It freaked me out so much I almost dropped the damn pizza. I wish I had just gotten out of there and taken the hint, but I decided to give knocking on the door one last try. This time, the door creaked open, and from the darkness within I made out a silhouette of a man. I told him that I had his pizza. I thought he would take it from me and pay me, but no, he waved me forward with a black-gloved hand, then disappeared into his house. I really didn't want to go inside, but I knew my boss would be angry if I just left without getting the money. So I used my side to push the door open further, then I went in, leaving the door open behind me. I couldn't really see where I was going and almost tripped over my own feet. I called out to the man and asked him where he wanted the pizza placed. The door opened at the end of the hallway and the man appeared holding a candle. This illuminated just how creepy both this man and his house were. He was wearing a tatty old suit and had gray hair that stuck out in thin wisps. These portraits of serious-looking men in old-fashioned clothes covered the walls. Weirdly, all of them were dangling a pocket watch chain in front of them. He vanished into the room ahead of him, taking the light with him. I followed him. I planned to get the money ASAP and get out of there. I pushed open the door and entered the small kitchen. Candles flickered on the wooden kitchen table. Weirdly, I saw that covering what seemed to be every available space of the walls were clocks, all in various shapes and designs. It took me a minute to realize that all of their hands were pointing to the same and wrong time, 3:10. I felt uneasy about all this, so I politely told the man how much it was, then went to place the pizza on the table. His whole demeanor changed, and he yelled, "No!" and elbowed my arm away, almost causing me to drop the pizza box. When I asked him what was wrong, he said repeatedly under his breath, "Not the right time for this sacrifice. Not the right time for this sacrifice." Then he moved in front of the door, blocking my only exit, and gave me this real sinister toothed smile. I knew I needed to get out of there, and quick. So I told the guy the money didn't matter, he could have the pizza on me. I placed it on the floor and tried to get past the man. I didn't want to have to push him over or anything, but despite me repeatedly asking, he wouldn't move. He just laughed, this unsettling, low-pitched laugh, then pulled this chain from out beneath his suit shirt. On the end of it was a clock face with the time, 3:10. I told the man I had to go and reached for the door handle, but he immediately grabbed my arm and bore me into with dark eyes, saying, "Not the time for this sacrifice." I yanked my arm free, shoved him out of my way, opened the door, and ran out of there as quickly as I could. I could hear him following me, but I didn't look back. I didn't stop to catch my breath until I was back in my car with the doors locked. I managed to drive a few blocks away, then parked up and calmed myself down. My heart was racing like crazy, and I was freaked out, but also mad. My boss knew there was something weird about this customer, yet he still sent me there. When I returned to work, I found my boss and confronted him about it. I quickly relayed to him what happened, and his face fell, and he kept apologizing. He said that he had just presumed it was Goofball messing around. I quizzed him on this, and he told me that the customer ordered an olive pizza, but he requested for the olives to be shaped into the numbers on the face of the clock, with the hands at 3:10. This made me feel so unsettled, so I quit right then and there. No way could I face delivering another pizza ever again. When I think back to that night, I wondered what would have happened to me if I hadn't managed to get past the man. I also think about those portraits of the men holding pocket watches. I hadn't been paying much attention to what time it was on them, but thinking back on it now, I think I know. I think we all know. I just have no idea what the significance of 310 was to those people and what it means to that man.